Let me ask a magic question. How many of you have got some huge dreams inside of you? How many of you have them? All right. How many of you have got some huge ambition? You've learned a few things in the last couple of days that you know you're going to go home and use. How many of you are excited about that? All right. So I want to tell you the truth of the matter. I went down and met with Success Magazine a few weeks ago, and we were talking about what I was going to discuss today, and we talked about all of you, individually and as a collective. And the conversation, they said, Michael, I want you to come on at the end, not exactly at the end, near the end, and I'm going to ask you to do something very special for us. And it made a lot of sense to me because I'm from New Jersey. They said, all right, that's good, right? All right, Jersey. All right, that's either you love you or hate you type thing. Now, what they said is, I want you to come on almost as a hitman. And I thought about, that's easy, a hitman. And what they meant by that is, they want you to hit on some points and want to make certain the few things happen in the next little bit. How many of you would like to learn in the next 30 minutes how to get yourselves to really do what it is you've been thinking about doing? How many of you would love that? How many of you would love the ability to remove some blocks that you've had in your life for years? How many of you would love that? And how many of you are willing to pay attention, allow yourself to get those things so it becomes easier for you to make things happen? How many of you would love that? If you would say, I would? All right. So one of the things that I've recognized in life is it's easy while you're here in this room. It's easy and it's safe here because you're around successful-minded people. But how many of you know that you're going to go home in the next couple of hours or couple of days and those people are there? How many of you know what I'm talking about? You know those people? Those people that don't exactly have the same dream you have. You're like, oh, shoot, my husband. Yes, you're talking about him directly. I don't mean mine, I mean yours, right? Now, also people are saying, when I leave here, how do I know this is all going to happen? My job is to destroy in the next little bit your old program, your old way of thinking, and apply a new one in the 27-minute period. How many of you guys are game on? If you are, say I am. All right, so here's the way it's going to happen. I'm going to give you a quick little story, get caught up, because we don't really know each other. How many of you have I met before? Anyone I've met before? Okay, I got a few fans, like maybe 10, 15 here in this room. Okay, great. And the rest of you are going to become fans of not me by the time I'm done. You're here to become fans of you. So here's where this story really began, and I can really relate to all of you. Way before I got invited to speak here, years ago, I was the guy reading the magazine with all the desires in the world to be successful. And I'm like, am I going to be successful? I really want to be. I want to make this work. I had drive, I had ambition, like everyone here in this room, but something felt like it was missing. Now, I thought back as I was discovering my story of really what I wanted to discuss with all of you, and I'm like, I don't exactly have that typical speaker story. But I have a story very similar to most of you here in this room, and maybe we could find this could be the thing that could allow you to start taking more action in your life. I love the story about the speaker who I grew up on the subway and I was left there for 9 years and I grew up eating out of a trash can. How many of you have heard that one before? And I get excited about that, I get moved. I didn't have a story like that. I have all my limbs, I have everything. I also didn't grow up on the other side of the equation where my dad was Bill Gates. How many of you would like that to be your story and game over? Okay? Now, for me, that wouldn't be exciting because my whole life, I've had masterful ambition inside of me. How many of you could say your whole life you've had a ton of ambition inside of you? How many of you got a burning flame inside that's been there for years? How many of you have that? How many of you recognize that sometimes it burns super bright and sometimes it goes out? How many of you know what I'm talking about? How many of you realize it's a pilot light that needs to go really, really bright? So here's the way my story goes, and it probably is very similar to everyone here in this room. I grew up with what I believe the world's biggest challenge of the last, I would say 50 or 60 years has been for people. If you've ever wondered why success is difficult for most people or why you've had a challenge getting what it is that you want, it probably falls in this area and you didn't know it. See, it's the alcoholic that doesn't know they're the alcoholic that has the problem. How many of you know what I mean? It's the food you didn't realize that you shouldn't be eating that causes the problem. It's the activity you do in your relationships that mess things up. See, I grew up in a very, very specific way, like so many of you. And here's where my challenge lied. I grew up something called middle class. Now, how many of you can relate to middle class? Now, let me ask a question. How many of you grew up either one of these three flavors? Lower, middle, straight up middle, or upper? How many of you know what I'm talking about? Now, some of you are wondering, like, Michael, why is this a problem? Well, here's why it becomes a problem. When you have nothing, being motivated is easy. You either do it or you die. How many of you get that? When you're rich, it's like I either keep my parents' money or I waste it on stupid things and lose it all and then they have to bail me out. But when you're middle class, you're right down the middle and you're okay. And you're this thing that really messes up success. You become a little something called average. Now I want to think about that word. Any of my clients know I think average what? Yep, it's not good, and it sucks. And here's why I'm going to bring this up. How many of you have ever felt this before in your life, that you know you're capable of more, but your actions say something different? How many of you have noticed that? Doesn't mean you're a bad person. See, when you grow up middle class, here's what happens. You have more than enough pairs of shoes. You got two. See, as a kid, I got to go to nice things. I got to go to Disneyland on TV. I got to watch it. But my parents never took me. I got to go to Corning, New York to watch glass get made. We got to go on fun field trips. My parents would take me places, and they'd say, you'll appreciate it later, these museums we're taking you to. And they told me I'd appreciate it later, and I do now. But the reason I'm bringing this up, and the reason it's so important for all of you to understand is, when everything is okay, you're okay. And when okay is okay, okay is still okay. But okay is okay, it's not okay if it's not okay anymore. So my job out here, and I get that, I was gonna print that as a t-shirt. I even talked to success partners. I'm like, can I get that as a t-shirt? Okay is okay, and okay is okay, as long as okay is okay, but okay is okay as long as okay is okay, but as soon as it's not okay, it's what? Not okay anymore. So I'm gonna ask all of you to accept something today, and accept something, and Mel would talk about this, that fine and okay, they fit in a box, and we've gotta step on it. Meaning that if you're not where it is that you wanna be right now, our job is to make that place be bigger. So when I talk about this whole middle class challenge for people is, we've been living in a world that's been trained to be average. I would say I'm probably the most average person you've ever met in your life. Outside of my height, I'm 6'6", outside of my ambition, which is 90,000 feet tall. But outside of that, everything else is pretty average. The way I grew up, my family, the being, everything else I had. And I remember being at an event like this. I got a chance to do an interview earlier, and they said, what was the defining moment in your life? When did things start to change? And I remember just a random occurrence of two things that changed everything for me. Because in your life, it's those little moments that make the difference. It's those little things that you didn't think about that really change everything. And for me, it was taking a college class. And it was a class I wasn't paying attention in, I wasn't doing well, and they handed me this assignment. And I remember looking at the assignment, it said, you have to read one of these books. And it was boring. It was like Beowulf, boring. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. How many of you remember these books, right? Boring. The Outsiders, the movie was good. But then one of the books was simple. And sometimes you don't get the wake-up call right away. And it was that book, How to Win Friends and what? Influence People. And it was a great book. And I got that book, and I was so excited about reading it because it was the first experience my entire life that I ever realized that if you want to get good at something, you have the ability to do it if you could find somebody that can help you get good at it. And that's what this event is about. That's what success is all about. It's about finding people that have done it and getting yourself to do those same things at the same time. So I got the book, but I didn't exactly get the message. And it wasn't until a few years later that I was at an event very similar to you guys here. And all the ambition in the world, super excited, driven galore. How many of you are business owners? Raise your hands high. Proud, high. And I remember being there as a business owner, acting like everything was great on the outside, but on the inside, it wasn't so great. How many of you know what I'm talking about? You can raise your hand like that when it's one of those. Like, how many of you realize you don't want to tell everybody? How many of you do the halfway wave? Yeah, not me, but me, yeah. So, that's funny, isn't it? It's the truth, isn't it? The truth doesn't hurt. It's funny if you laugh at it. Got it. Very good. Okay. So what happened is, I'm at this event, and this guy said one word that changed everything for me. He said, if you want to succeed in life, and you want to succeed in business, and you want to succeed with a great body, with a better sex life. How many of you would like that? If you would also, raise your hands. Okay, good. Nobody wants to admit that one. I don't know if we're supposed to talk about that from stage, but how many of you would like a better sex life? You would say I would? All right. Scream it out, because that's we're driven as people, biologically, to do things we really want to do. Now, this guy said in the room, he said, the one word that changes everything, and I heard him say it. And those two are married or together, and they're like, okay, let's go home and work on that one right now. Okay, yeah. So I hear this one word, and it changed everything for me. And it was a simple word. He said, if you want to change your life, you need to understand a little something called influence. Now, when I first heard that word, I thought of that word, and I thought immediately what every one of you think here in this room. I got it. I got to influence other people. I got to get people to do things. I got to get my mom to do things. I got to get these clients to do things. And I got obsessed with the word influence. But what I didn't understand that day is another side of it. When he kept on talking and I was paying attention, he said, I think you're not understanding me, because it's not necessarily just influencing other people. It's about you becoming a person of influence. How many of you in this room believe that if you were a person of influence and you did what you said you were going to do more often, how many of you realize you'd have a better life? How many of you recognize when you look in the mirror in the morning, when you see it, you know that if you could influence other people, you could do more, be more, become more? How many of you understand what I'm saying? How many of you wrote down something you are super proud of that you really want to do on a piece of paper in the last 24 hours? If that's you, say that's me. How many of you realize it's only a person of influence that's going to pull it off? So when I talk about strategic influence for the next little bit, I'm going to share with you 3 simple questions. 3 simple things that are going to get you to take more action, understand your life differently, and really put your life into a massive perspective to get yourself to do what you want. See, for me, strategic influence is not necessarily getting somebody to buy something from you. And strategic influence is not necessarily getting one over on another person. Strategic influence is that feeling you get. Now, how many of you have been there before where you went on one of these things called a diet? Has anyone ever went on a diet? Raise your hand if you've been on a diet. Okay, how many of you realize while you're on the diet, you wished you could die? How many of you know what I'm saying? The word makes sense. It's not fun at all. But when you're on a diet and you're laying there in your bed and it's 11 o'clock at night and you get this craving inside of your brain for cheesecake or chocolate. Some of you are like, I don't like cheesecake. Chocolate. Anyone ever get a craving for broccoli? I don't think that's ever happened before. You're the guy. I get it. I totally understand. The one guy that messes up everything, right? So what happens is you're laying there in your bed. It's 11 o'clock at night, and you're saying to yourself, I got it. I would like the ability to lay here, but the craving kicks in. Just like I want to make 6 figures this year, but the craving kicks in to go to Starbucks. I have a rule in my company and my life. It says, if you make under 80 grand a year, you're not welcome at Starbucks. Any financial planner in the room would say, invest the money in your business or your life. Don't go there. So you're laying there in your bed, it's 11 o'clock at night, you get the feeling to go to the fridge, and you step out of the bed. You take another step. And if you had strategic influence, you would say, stop, go back to bed, buddy. But you wander with an excuse to the kitchen. It's like Chris Rock always said, he goes, there's no reason to be at an ATM at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's also no reason you should ever be at a refrigerator at 11:30 at night, if you've already been sleeping. So you're standing there and you're having a debate with the fridge. Do I or don't I? And you open it. But if you have strategic influence, you would not grab it, you'd go back to bed. The ability to influence yourself. So what happens is you open it and you're staring at the broccoli and the cheesecake or the chocolate cake. And at that moment, you have a decision to make. Can I control who it is that I am? Do I have the power to close the door? This is a metaphor. This is not anything more than how you live your life and your business. What strategic influence is the ability to deal with certain things. Like, how many of you would love the ability with your brain to have the ability when you have a tough day, when you're leaving work one day and somebody calls you, complains? How many of you have brought that home with you? Anybody? How many of you ever got in a fight in the morning with the one you love and you brought it to work? How many of you realize the strategic influence? You turn that off. See, I know one little thing, and I talk about average. And people say, are you talking about average compared to other people? The average I'm talking about is that thing you run into. Because if you've ever been really excited about doing something, but for some reason you run into a wall, anyone ever had that? And you're wondering, like, what is that wall? Like, for some reason I can't jump. I can't get myself to do it. I have a name for that. That is your averageness. That is your ability to stay who it is that you currently are instead of becoming everything that you want. And for some reason, we have trouble getting through that wall. The only way you're going to get through that wall is to understand where the program came from in the first place. So I'm going to ask you about 3 questions right now if you guys are excited to do this. I'm super excited, and I'm really excited to do this. How many of you are excited about doing this? And the reason I bring this up is one of our speakers mentioned this morning. He said, you never should make a new decision when you're in a what kind of state of mind? Tired, angry, crappy, whatever you want to call it. Not so good. So make certain you're in the right state of mind as we go through this exercise, because the next 15 minutes will be ones that impact your life in a major way. So why I bring this up to you is a few years back, I was having a little bit of a challenge. And when I say challenges, I think when we first start in life, when we go to be successful, our challenges show up all the time because that's what we're doing. That's who we are. That's what's going on. But later on, when we start doing okay, we don't want to take as many risks. So for me, I was having a couple challenges with 2 areas of my life. My health was okay, but I knew it could be better. My business was very good, but it was average for what I was capable of. How many of you can relate to this? And I couldn't figure out why, even though I knew what to do. I had the friends, I had the contacts, I knew what I needed to do, but why was I having trouble taking the action? What was I doing that was missing? And I'm the guy that teaches action, and I'm having trouble getting myself to do it. And then I did the exercise again for myself. And it went a little something like this. How many of you have ever done a Facebook Live? Anyone ever done one? How many of you ever noticed that when you're on social media, there's things that show up in the background that you didn't know were there? Anyone know what I'm talking about? All right, yeah. So imagine for a second, this is the first part of the exercise. Imagine for a second there was an outsider in your life, a consultant, somebody you hired. And this is such a good exercise that you can do today, tomorrow, next week, next month. I don't care if you make $100 million a year. I don't care if you make $1 million a year. I don't care if you're overweight or underweight or whatever it is. This will work for you. So I want you to imagine for a second that there's an outsider that you hired, a consultant, and they came into your life and they said to you, I'm going to watch you for 1 week and I'm going to honestly tell you what about you that you currently do. So I played this game with myself and I said, what if an outsider watched me? How would they be honest? Now, would an outsider consultant that was nice and kind, would they say to you, you're a jerk, you're rude, you're mean? Would they say that stuff? What would they say? They'd say honest stuff. They'd say things like this to me. Michael, you're a hard worker. How many of you have been plagued of being a hard worker? You're a good person. You're very scattered. How many of you other people have ADD like me? I always say if you don't have it, you should get it because almost every rich person I know has it. I remember once someone said to me, they said, Michael, you have ADD, you mentioned it. I said, yes, a dynamic disorder. And the reason I like having a dynamic disorder is it's made me a lot of money. It allows me to focus on many things at once and also keep track of my presentation at the same time. So if an outsider was looking at you, how would they say your life looks? What would they say? Would they say you're a good person? They'd say you're unorganized. Maybe you lack focus. They'd say you've got this going on, you got that. And what's happening is, imagine you had a Facebook Live campaign following you for a month. What would they say? You know what to do, but you're not doing what it is that you know. My question for you is, what would that answer be? See, when you get the answer on that piece of paper, you don't need to answer it right now, but I'm going to have you answer it later. Because in lies the situation is, how would they see you? See, if I played a game called I Go First, I literally would say a good guy who means well, who knows what to do, that doesn't always do what he does what he says to other people that he's going to do, but for some reason he holds back and he knows he can play bigger, but he's not doing it. How many of you can relate to you're just like me? How many of you can relate to that? I spoke for you. And the reason it's important to see if an outsider is, the outsider will be less critical than you. The second question is going to take all of you back in time. Now, how many of you remember this little activity? You played a little activity when you were a kid, and some of you young millennials, where are the millennials? Any millennials in here? Okay, yay, one, great, hey, okay, cool. Now, what's interesting is, there used to be this thing we would do when we were kids, about 5 years old, called riding a bike. How many of you remember riding a bike? Now, I want you to think about this for a second. When you first learned how to ride a bike, when you set out to learn how to ride a bike, what was the number one reason you wanted to ride a bike? Let's scream out the answer. What's the reason? What was the reason? You wanted to have fun, right? Okay, what else? What's the reason? You wanted to go to your girlfriend's house at 5. Good job. Okay, what else? Anybody else? You want to not exercise, okay? Now, I believe the number one reason you wanted to ride a bike when you first got started was very, very simple. You wanted to learn how to ride a bike so you can ride it. How many of you would agree that was the reason? So you went up to that thing, you went up to that bike, and you said to the bike, you said, got it, I'm gonna ride you. I'm gonna ride this thing. And you're 5, 6 years old, no training wheels on the bike, and you walk up to that bike, and you put one leg over the other, your parent puts you on it, and instantly, you learn that you don't know what? Balance. How many of you would agree you didn't know what you didn't know? How many of you get that? If you do, say I do. And then your job is, how do I what? Get balance. And then how do I steer? And then eventually you go to your friend's house. But I was having a challenge working out probably about 3 years ago, and I couldn't figure out why. And I asked myself the magic question, the same question I ask you. For any activity you have in your life, whether it's relationships, whether it's health, whether it's business, here's the question that I asked, and it's simple. I asked, what was my original reason for getting started working out? And I went back in my head. Or what was your original reason you wanted to be successful? Or what was the biggest reason you wanted a relationship? Or what was the original reason? And I went back in my head for working out. I remember being 13 years old. How many of you remember being a 13-year-old gangly boy? Anybody remember that? Ladies? I was about 6'4", about 140 pounds, and I had to work out because I played ice hockey and I didn't want to get killed. The other reason I wanted to work out as a kid, because it's part of a teamwork, right? And also, when you're 13 years old and you're a boy, you want to impress what? What do you want to impress? Girls, right? Because they like guys that could pump iron and work out. They want to look good, right? So I'm about 30-something, and I'm wondering, why am I not wanting to work out? And I realized that if I hit anybody now, I go to jail. It's not like hockey. I also realized that I'm not part of a team anymore. I also realized impressing girls and being married don't go well together. How many of you agree with that? It's not good, right? My wife's here, not good, so I don't want to do that. And I said, I can't work out. And then I realized I'm going to have to come up with a new reason. So I want all of you to think about this. Your original reason why you decided to be successful. See, for me, the reason I got stuck in business for a little while, and some of you may be stuck, my original reason for getting started in business was to be free. One of my original reasons to start business or to be successful in life was I really wanted to be a person that could survive. How many of you, your original business plan, if you took it down to a bank, or your original financial plan was to survive? How many of you know what I'm talking about? And it was to survive. It was to get by. It was to just get by. So then I'm sitting here in business years later, and I'm surviving, and I'm free, but I'm not getting what it is that I want. So what I recognized is for a lot of us, we need to change our reasoning for things. When I talk about influence, it's simple words that make a difference. Like I have a zillion words I can teach you that can make anybody say yes to anything. You guys wouldn't want to know those, would you? Okay, I'm not going to cover those now. I'll cover that at another time. But the reason I bring that up is there's also words that move you. The second I stopped exercising because I wasn't good at it anymore, and I started training, everything changed for me. I didn't have a negative reference for training, but I had a negative reference for exercising. When I stopped surviving in business and I started realizing I needed to make my business about something else, that's when things started to change. So looking back to your original reason why you chose to do something, like, what's the reason you got into a relationship? I was bored. Well, now you're not bored anymore. What if the original reason you got started in a relationship was to find someone incredible in your life to share your life with and to make their life better? How many of you realize your relationship would be different? But the majority of our decisions that we make in our lives are based on us getting out of the problems we currently have. How many of you realize that your current situation that you have right now was probably in direct result for you to solve a problem you had in the past? How many of you know what I'm talking about? If you do, say I do. What I want to do is get all of you past that point right now by asking the last magic question, the last 7 minutes. So you go home and you play with this. You look at your life. What was my original reason for doing this? And the last question is simple. But I'll ask you to just close your eyes for a second. And I am from Jersey. I'm not going to steal your wallet. Don't worry about it. Okay? Don't worry about it. They got that stigma, right? So with your eyes closed or open, whatever you choose, I want you to imagine that your original reason was solved. I want you to imagine that when you go home, you're already past that thing that you had in your way. You already have more confidence than you had in the past. You're already doing more of the things that you really want to be doing. You're feeling the way that you want to feel. You're making things happen. You're already solved your financial worry because you already have survived. You're here. You have the money. You have the courage to be here. If you stand in that possibility that you're already living more of the way that you wanted, here's my question for you. What would you do now? What decision would you make leaving here? Because at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I learned at that seminar years ago was this is not the event. The real event is your life when you leave here. The real event is you open up your eyes right now is what happens on Monday. The real event, what happens on the drive home when you leave here today, the decisions that you make. So the question you want to ask yourself, the last question, if we had more time, I would go through this over and over again, is to ask you this one very simple thing. If you could stand in the possibility right now that you were already living the way you wanted to live, what would you make your life about? When I talk to business owners, they say it's not just about getting by, because that was your original business plan. How many of you would like to be more profitable? How many of you would love that? Raise your hands. How many of you would like to stop having a relationship? How many of you would like to be massively in love? If you would, say I would. How many of you would love the ability to have tons of money in the bank? How many of you would love that? How many of you, instead of working out, how many of you would like to have a ton of energy? If you would, say I would. It's all going to depend on how deliberate you get. And I'm going to challenge all of you to think about this last exercise that I'm going to do with you, because when I talk about the word average, I've recognized that every one of us have developed a life for ourselves that keeps us stuck. And the reason it keeps us stuck is when you start doing well in life or you start doing better than you did before, we develop a box that we put ourselves into. And the reason we develop this box is to contain what it is that you currently have so you don't lose what it is you have. But whenever you put yourself in a box, there's only one way to get out of it. You can either bust your head and hope to go through the wall, or you can learn to grow. Now I'm going to ask you not to just grow yourself right now. I'm going to ask you to grow your focus on what it is that you're doing. So I'm going to draw something fun out here right now to help all of you out. How many of you are learning right now? If you are, say I am. How many of you realize the influence is on you when you look in the mirror? How many of you are seeing that? If you are, say, I am. And the magic question I'm going to ask you, the last one right now, is this. I want you to imagine that you have in front of you what I would call, I guess the best way to put this is, I don't drink, but imagine it was a martini glass in front of you. Anybody know the shape of a martini glass? And it looks like this, straight down. And it looks like this, straight down. And there's 3 sections inside this martini glass. And people say, Michael, why don't you drink? And I'm not for or against you drinking or not drinking, but here's my belief on it. People ask me all the time, Michael, you're really successful at what you do. What kind of jeans do you wear? You're successful at what you do. What did you eat the other day? People will see me like taking something out of my fridge at my house on a video. What was that ketchup you had? What kind was that? So I figure, let's say you got an alcoholic in the room and they see me drinking. How many of you realize I've just inspired them to drink? How many of you get that? I'm careful. And I'm not saying what to do or what not to do, and I don't care what we do, alcohol or not, whatever you do is your choice. But I'm going to teach you that when you understand the last piece of this, how influential all of you really are. So think of this. You got this martini glass. Shh, shh. What I want to do with the shouting in the room is to think about the most important things in your life. Now, I know we can divide this into 3 very important sections. So if you guys can help me out, because I have 3 minutes and I'm not going to work with comatose, I got to work with alive. So I want you to think about this right now. From this side of the room, what is one of the most important things in your life? Scream it out. Family. How many of you realize family? How many of you love your family? How many of you got family you'd like to get rid of? I get it. So family. Now, you can't say family again. Family, and how about we put in that box spirituality? Was that part of family too? How many of you want to put that there? Family, spirituality, and health, all in that box. That's one thing, the personal stuff. Now, outside of family, spirituality, and health, what else do you have in your life? This side, what do you got? Financial. Shh, draw a money thing. Shh, shh. How many of you want more of that? If you do, say I do. Some of you are like, how many of you want more money? If you do, say I do. Got it. And then what other areas important in our lives? We'll keep that one. Put that in the family. That's where the family came from. And the last thing is a little something called your skills. What is it, folks? Your what? How many of you got some ridiculous skills? If you do, say I do. How many of you can make a mean pie? Anybody? How many of you are really good at golf? Okay. How many of you got some stuff you're really great at? Okay, so you got skills, family, relationships, health, money. So I want to play a little game here real quick and say Peter was right. And there are going to be some challenges in the world. And a very, very kind, nice terrorist shows up at your house. And the kind, nice terrorist says, I'll be kind about this, but I need one of your 3 things inside that martini glass. You got money, you got skills, which can help you get more money, and you got your family. How many of you would give up your family first? How many of you would give up the money immediately? If you would, say I would. Isn't that interesting? You spend 90% of your life working to make more money, 90% of your worrying how you're going to make money, 90% of your time, how am I going to get more, and instantly you'll give it away like that. So let's say this guy is really aggressive, this terrorist guy comes back, he goes, money wasn't enough, I need more. You got 2 options right now. You're going to give up your what? Skills, or your family and your health. What are you guys getting rid of? Skills. Which where we spend our day working on. How many of you realize we spend 90% of our lives away from the people we love? We spend 90% of our times not taking care of our health, not doing the things we need to do. Most of us need a direction. We need more of a focus in our lives. And I'm going to tell you that focus is going to come in very simply when you understand this one last little piece of the puzzle. How many of you recognize that your life is designed to do more? And I'm going to tell you the secret that's going to change everything for every single one of you is one very simple word. And it's a desire for you to accept what I didn't accept years ago, so that I didn't understand it. I'd come to an event after event after event like this. And I'd come here looking for the answer, not for my business necessarily, but for that part of my heart that says, I know I'm capable of more. How many of you got that burning desire that says you know you're capable of more? How many of you realize that it's the decisions you make today that are going to make a difference? If you care about that one side and you want things to change, we've got to change the focus. And if I could sell you on anything today, is a very, very simple thing. For you to look in the mirror and understand, I don't care how introverted or extroverted any of you are, how many of you recognize that if you accept how influential you are as a human being, that your showing up in the world is influential. That if you smoke a cigarette, you're either getting someone to start or stop. If you realize for the next 3 months that everyone is following you and watching you, would you live differently? My challenge for all of you is to accept how powerful and influential you are. And if you do that over yourself and you get how powerful you, not over others, over yourself, that's when your life will change. Realize how inspiring you can be. Stop being average and start being all you can be.